Now let's take a look at this full screen title graphic. Again, I need to do some prep work because I don't actually want these footage items in my comp, so I'll just delete those out of here. And then I'll select all of my layers with Controller Command A and drag them back to where the first visible element is aligned to the first frame of the comp. That's this one right here, and this won't need any protected regions because the timing should not change. If anything was stretched out in Premiere, it's going to retime everything in the comp. There's no part of this that doesn't have motion, so I'm not even going to bother with protected regions. I'll just go to the last frame of the animation, press N to set my end work point, and then trim the comp to that work area. So my template is only going to be a little over 3 seconds long, but that's exactly what we wanted. Next, let's grab the source text for the title just so we can change this to something else. I'll go into the title comp, open up my Essential Graphics panel, and then switch the primary from lower third to full screen title, and then drag in the source text. So I'll open this up, go into the text, click and drag this source text up into the panel, and then rename this event title. We'll leave the actual text as is, and then while I'm at it, I'll just give this a name. We'll call it kite surfing, which I realize wouldn't make sense if there are multiple events, but just for the sake of consistency, I'm gonna keep the kite surfing as kind of the title of the show, and then we'll say event name. Now, if you remember, we're using a second instance of the text layer up here as a silhouette of everything below it. That's what's punching this hole as it fades out into the background. And changing this source text, if I change it to something else, is not going to update that version of the source text. So what I need to do is link this source text to this source text. And this is also very simple to do in After Effects. I'm just gonna find the source text property for the second layer, and then there's another pick whip right over here, right in line with that property. This is called the property pick whip. And it's basically like parenting except for individual properties. So I can click and drag this down to the source text for the other text layer and let go. And now you see that that's updated. It says something else. Whatever we type in to this source text property will be reflected in this source text property. All right, let's close that up, change the text back to kite surfing, jump back to the full screen title comp, and let's find a good frame for the poster. That looks good. I'll say set poster time. And that's really the only control I need. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say export motion graphics template, save the project. Local templates folder is good. I'll click OK, and then we'll test it out in Premiere to make sure everything works out. So I'll browse. That search is already bringing up the other template, so I'll just click and drag that down and we'll play through this. Looks great. And goes right on into the next clip. And because we didn't set any protected regions, you can't extend this comp out. So changing this will not change the timing. It will just simply cut it off like any other footage item. Let's just select the template and change the text to something else. Let's say paragliding. It updates, looks great. Play it back, it all works, it's all animated. Because we use text animators to do the spacing of the text animation, it all is dynamic to whatever we type in there. That looks fantastic. Finally, let's look at this standings chart. And this is going to be a little bit more complicated, so let me close out these other comps, and we'll just focus on the layers that we need. Now, again, I don't need this footage in the background, and I don't need that adjustment layer. We're actually going to recreate this inside of Premiere, this adjustment layer that's changing how the background looks. For the template though, I'm gonna delete both of those layers, and just to clean this up, I'll press U to bring up all the keyframes and U one more time to collapse them all. Select all the layers with Controller Command A and align them to the beginning of the comp. That way the animation starts off right where it should, and this comp does have a set amount of time for the animation. So I can go forward to about, let's see, it's around the 2-3 second mark. Let's just round it off at 3. I'll set my work area's out point, and we'll protect this region. So I'll say create protected region from work area. That way, nothing will ever affect the timing of those animations. Now there's more in this comp that I'd like to control with the Essential Graphics panel than the past two examples. We have 7 different text layers that I'd like to be able to customize, as well as all of these stat progress bars. And the way that we set these up makes it easy to adjust them in After Effects, but it's not going to transfer over to Premiere the same way because each one of these is just a duplicate of the same comp. Remember, we set up the essential properties for this progress percentage scale to allow me to adjust this within this comp, but I can't drag this essential property to the essential graphics panel. So we're going to need to adjust that, but let's start with just the text. I'm going to switch my primary comp to be the standings comp, and I'll name this right off the bat. We'll just call it kite surfing standings, and I'll go ahead and set a poster frame. And let's start by adding all of the source text properties for the text layers. Now I could do this one at a time, or I could easily just use this search bar right here in the timeline to find the exact property I'm looking for. So I'll just search for source text, and that's going to bring the source text property up in all of the text layers. Now this first one is the standings text up here. I don't want that one, but if I just Control or Command click on each one of these other properties, I can right click on one of them and say add property to essential graphics, and that puts them all in at once. Now it is in reverse order, so I need to do some rearranging, but I also want to add some formatting. This dropdown right here allows me to add comments and groups to my controls. I'd like to group all of the source text properties into one folder. So I'll say add group, and I'll call this text, and then drag each one of these into that folder, and at the same time rearrange their order. That way it starts at the top and goes down. And all of these labels are actually going to work out just fine, contestant 1 through 7, and then we can type in all the names here in both After Effects and Premiere, but I'll just leave it as is for now. What's great though is that I can collapse this folder up now for organization. I'll just cancel out my search bar here to get all of my layers back in the view, and the next thing we need to work with is the progress bar. Now, like I said, these are all duplicates of the same comp, but I need individual access to that scale for each one of these progress bars. In order to do that, I'm going to have to restructure how this is laid out. Instead of using a single pre-comp for each one of these bars, I'm going to need to go into my pre-comps, find that progress bar, and make 7 duplicates of it. That way I can have 7 unique controls for each one of those progress bars. So I'm going to start by renaming this one progress bar 1, and then duplicate this 7 times. So I have 7 copies with Control or Command D. But just having those up here doesn't mean I have access to them in my comp. These are all still the same first pre-comp. If I click this layer name column, it's going to switch to displaying the source name, which is showing us that they're all progress bar 1. I can swap these out with other pre-comps though, without changing anything about their timing or placement in the comp. So with the second one selected, I'm going to click and drag on progress bar 2 down into my timeline, but I'm going to hold down Alt or Option on a Mac before letting go of my mouse, and it swaps the source that way. So I'll do that again. I'll select the next one, grab progress bar 3, hold Alt or Option, and swap it out. Now, nothing visually is different about these comps, which is why we're not seeing a change here, but we can be sure that we're looking at the correct source because their names are changing. So let's do that for the remaining pre-comps, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And now what I can do is go into each one of those pre-comps. So I'll select all of them and double click to open all of them at once. And we'll start with progress bar 1, adding that to the essential graphics panel for the standings comp. And I'm going to go ahead and add one more group really quickly. We'll call this progress bars. And then I'll just simply grab the scale property for the progress percentage null. That's what controls how far along that has animated, and drag that into the progress bars. And I'll just rename this progress percentage 1. And I'll just continue that process for each one of these comps, just adding in that scale property on each comp, renaming them to correspond to where they are in the list. And now that I have access to each one of these, let me just close these out and we'll get back to the standings comp. I'm able to modify them individually, but you'll notice that we still have all of these scales set up in here the way that they were originally, and that's because the essential properties is still set from the previous setup. So what I need to do is switch my primary back to the original progress bar pre-comp and delete it. And I should have done that before I made all of the duplicates because I actually need to do that for each instance. But as I'm doing this, you're seeing that all of these are changing back to 100%. And once I've done all of this, I'll be able to modify each and every one of them. So I'm just going to close all of these and then open up just the standings comp. So I know these are the essential properties I'm dealing with. And if I grab the X scale for any one of these, I'm able to dial this back individually for every single one of the progress bars. So let's just put in some random values here and double check to make sure that everything is still working properly. And sure enough, it is. Now that I have all these controls set up in my Essential Graphics panel, I can export this as a motion graphics template, save the project, click OK, and then test it out in Premiere. So let's jump over there, go to the browse. Here's my standings chart. I'll just click and drag that down. This is a much longer comp. That's actually probably something I should have set up in here is a limit, but you may actually want this graphic on screen for a long amount of time. Still, that's something I should have thought about and you should definitely think about before exporting the template. But even if I trim this down, the animation in should not be affected since we created that protected region. Looks like it's playing back just fine. Let's see what our editing controls are. We have text, so we could type in Stacy Slater. We could add in Joey Korenman. I could put in Jake Bartlett, and all of that is updating dynamically. Again, I could have enabled the size control for these text layers. That probably would have been smart. This is another part of Mogert's, is just testing it out in Premiere, making sure that you didn't leave things out or not trim comps to where they should be. But overall, this template is working out great. And if I go to the progress bars, I should be able to modify these just by clicking and dragging, just like we did in After Effects. So I can very quickly rearrange how all of this progress is being displayed and have a completely customizable chart that, again, I don't have to jump back to After Effects to modify. I could hand this off to an editor and they would have no problem being able to modify this to fit the programming. Now, one last thing is that this clip in the background is no longer blurred or tinted, but I want to quickly show you how you can recreate that exact same effect in Premiere using adjustment layers. So first I'm going to just come up to File, go to New, and then down to Adjustment Layer, and then that's actually grayed out because Premiere has this weird little quirk where you need to be in the project panel, have that active, and then go up to File, New, Adjustment Layer. It'll ask you what size to make it. This is the size of my timeline, so I'll click OK. And then I can drag this down into my timeline just like in After Effects. Now I want to move my graphic up one track and I want to put my adjustment layer in here, extend it out a bit, but I want it to blur and tint the background layer before the standings chart gets to this point basically. So let's go to the effects panel and I'll search for the Gaussian blur effect or Gaussian blur, apply that to the adjustment layer. Go to my effects controls and just blur this out. So maybe about 15 pixels, and I'll set a keyframe, just like in After Effects. Then I'll back up to the start of the adjustment layer and turn that down to 0, and it's now animating that blur. Next, I'll search for the tint effect. We'll bring that out. And I want to sample some colors from the footage, so I'm just going to turn the amount to tint all the way down to 0, and we'll grab this like kind of deep blue, greenish teal color. And I'll select that for the white as well. So at 100%, it just fills it, but down at a lower value, it's just going to give a wash of color, and we'll align the animation of that property with the blurriness. So I'll just go to the next keyframe for blurriness, so I know it's aligned properly, set a keyframe on amount to tint, back it up to the start of the adjustment layer and set that down to 0. Now, just like in After Effects, I can easy ease these keyframes. I'll just select them all, right click, say ease in, right click again, say ease out. And now if I play this back, we've recreated the exact same look as what we had in After Effects. That all works out really well. I think that really ties everything together. But what's great is because we put this on an adjustment layer, you don't even have to adjust keyframes to retime it. You can just shift it around. If you need to, you can copy it to a different timeline or duplicate it in this one. It's just a smart way to work. These few simple controls might seem very basic, but implementing them into a motion graphics template not only would make your life easier as an editor, but maybe the person that you're working with, handing off something that the editor can then customize and change on their own without having to jump back to you and ask for an update is such a time saver and so valuable. So it's really important that you understand how to do this process. The thing is, we barely scratched the surface of what a Mogert can be. And if you're interested in learning more about it, be sure to check out this class where you can learn all kinds of stuff about Mogerts. Don't forget to download the assignment PDF so that you can try this out for yourself. Congratulations, you did it. You made it through this course. That is a monumental achievement. Believe me, I know how complicated After Effects is to a beginner. I'm just so excited that I got to be the one to present this information to you. But just going through this course material and watching through the lessons has given you such a head start in After Effects. If you didn't have time to complete all the assignments, I understand. It's a lot of information to keep up with, but I would strongly encourage you to go back and actually complete these assignments because Putting this stuff into practice is really what's going to get you comfortable in After Effects and solidify it in your mind. Congratulations again, and thanks for watching this course.